Hello everyone, and welcome to Method's Alpha Guide for the dungeon Neltharion's Lair. I'm Chris Potter, and here with me is Zerps.
Hey guys. Once you spawn into this dungeon, you'll be standing on top of a giant water slide. We were a bit confused at first, but then we saw our old friend Rathian, and he led us to the real start of the dungeon. The first packs in the dungeon doesn't really do much. They throw out some minor debuffs, and once they're killed, they'll leave a pool on the ground, which you should avoid to stand in. You'll have to kill a couple of mini Tectuses as well, and these once again doesn't really do much, just keep an eye out for the pool that they'll spawn. As you can see in the video, the debuff did seem to bug out on our mage here, and he had the debuff even though he wasn't standing in the pool, but again, alpha is alpha.
Then you'll come up to another jumpy down part, which brings you to the first boss, Rockmore. Rockmore is a fairly simple boss with only a few abilities. And the first and probably most annoying of them is this passive buff he has, which means that whenever he is attacked, he will spawn these little ads. Now, these ads aren't really too bad, and they can easily be cleaved down by the DPS. It just sort of gives the tank something to pay attention to by picking up the ads. Like the trash earlier, these ads also cause the bad green stuff on the ground when they die, so just watch out for when they die. The second ability that the boss has is a group-wide AoE called Shatter, which really doesn't do too much damage, and it actually kind of helps you out because it kills the little mobs for you. The last ability the boss has is Razor Shards, which will do considerable damage in a cone direction that the boss will choose, and you just want to make sure that you move out of that quickly. After you have killed the boss, you come up to a river and some barrels next to it, and you go full Hobbit mode. You'll ride down the river for a bit, and then fall down into the next part of the dungeon. Now I think it is possible here to skip a lot of the mobs, but we had a certain boomkin in our group, which meant that a lot of the mobs got pulled that we didn't intend to pull. We also somehow managed to pull the level 110 mobs, and I should mention here that in this dungeon we were only scaled to level 102. So it was very difficult for us to kill these mobs. Not only did they hit a lot harder than the other mobs, but our DPS had a very high chance of missing their spells against them because of the level difference. So if these level 110 mobs are intended to be here, and they're still in the dungeon when you do it, just be careful not to pull them. You should also be careful of the small lizard pet mobs that accompany one of them, as it casts a spell which will stun the tank for a few seconds, and this can be really dangerous if the tank is also tanking a lot of other mobs. You should try to stop the mob from running off to the drums and banging on it, because this will pull loads of mobs. You can see, however, we were able to manage the extra pull without too much of a problem.
So after getting through the valley, you'll encounter the second boss, who is called Rockshaper. The majority of the fight is just try to not stand bare on the ground. The most deadly ability she'll cast in the start is called Fist of the Mountain. It will spawn a bad pool on the 3 players, and any players caught in it will take considerable damage and get knocked back. The boss's other ability is called Stance of the Mountain. At first it can seem a bit confusing if you haven't read the dungeon journal or watched this video. When we first encountered this boss, we had absolutely no idea what was going on here. We really only realized after reading the dungeon journal. So to the mechanic itself. The boss will spawn 3 totem type things, and he'll encase himself in one of them. So if you're really good, you'll pay attention to which one he encases himself in, and kill that one. What we need to note here is that they'll jump around and they'll do some AoE damage. Basically they'll shuffle themselves. In order to break out the boss, you need to kill the totem which he got trapped in. But as we didn't have any idea which one he was trapped in, we simply killed all 3, and he eventually got broken out. After the boss, you get to the second half of the dungeon, and from here on out there's a lot of skippable trash. After skipping a couple of packs, you'll eventually encounter what appears to be a snail racing competition. But if you stick to the left side, you should be able to skip this pack as well. The packs before the third boss isn't really something special. As you can see in the video, Roger Brown decides to barrage and pull multiple packs. At first we thought we were gonna have problems, but we managed to clear them relatively easy.
And after that we came to the third boss, Naraxis. The first ability to take note of on this boss is the Rancid Maw ability, which targets 2 ranged players and spawns goo at their location. We just spawned these wherever and made sure not to stand in them. The second ability the boss has is called Toxic Reef, which spawns goo as well, but it's a different type of goo, and this is all over the melee area, and it leaves a few spaces where you can still attack the boss while not standing in it. So the melee and the tank just need to watch out for the safe spots. The boss will also summon some adds which will fixate a player. We think at the moment it always fixates on ranged players, as we didn't see it pick any melee players. It will stay fixated on them until it dies, or if it is kited over a green pool, it will become stuck in the pool, but it will start doing ranged attack at random members, causing damage. As they have quite low health, we decided the best way to deal with them was just to kill them off, rather than trying to kite them into the pools. Another ability the boss will do is called Spiked Tongue. We only see this being cast right at the end of our kill, but the idea is that the boss will pick a player and grab them with its tongue, dealing some damage, but also giving the boss a damage increasing buff every time he does it, which will stack up, sort of like a soft enrage. One thing to note on this boss is that when you kill it, you'll have a very limited amount of time to loot it before the boss despawns and makes way for you to jump down the hole. So if you want that loot, make sure you right click first. The final room of the dungeon is actually really cool looking. There's lava and bones everywhere, and it's sort of like a dragon den type thing. As we mentioned earlier, you can skip a lot of trash, and that's exactly what we do here. By running up the hill to the left, we almost skip the entire room. If you do this, however, you'll need to be careful during the boss fight that you do not accidentally pull the trash that you skip.
The last boss in the dungeon is called Boggle the Underking. The first ability we saw was called Magma Sculpture, which basically summons a giant ad which will fixate a random player. But the important thing to note here is that every second he is chasing the fixated player, he'll do pulsing AoE damage. Therefore it's really important that you quickly switch to this ad and kill it off. Right now in Alpha it doesn't have a lot of HP, so if you just make sure to swap, it'll die relatively fast.
Yeah, and the second ability the boss will do is Molten Crash. This is an ability he does on the tank, which will inflict big damage and knock the tank back. However, this ability can be avoided just by the tank having his active mitigation up when he casts this. The next ability the boss does is Crystal Spikes, which will create a zone on the ground and after a few seconds will spawn a pillar and deal minor damage to anyone standing in it. These pillars are important as you will need them to hide from one of the boss's other abilities called Magma Wave. Magma Wave is a cast the boss does that will inflict big damage to the group unless they are hiding behind a pillar. Make sure that you get behind the pillars when he casts this, as although it isn't a one-shot ability, it does do really high damage and it could easily lead to a wipe.
The last ability the boss has is called Landslide, and it's a slam in the direction that the boss is currently facing, and it will deal a lot of damage to anyone standing in it. Even more importantly is that it will shatter any pillars in the way as well, and as Chris mentioned before, you need these pillars to hide from the Magma Wave. So the ideal way here is for the tank to position the boss and face him away from any players and or pillars.
And overall this dungeon was very interesting. It had some mechanics that we hadn't seen before, and aesthetically it was really nice. We hope you enjoyed this guide of Neltharion's Lair, and be sure to like the video and leave a comment. Bye for now guys.